Get recording. Welcome, everybody. I forget what installment we're on here, but I just want to point you out to our YouTube page where some of our videos are up. They still need to be properly tagged, described, and so on. And there's a few videos that we've had real trouble translating onto YouTube, and they seem to be stuck on my computer somewhere. So there'll be a few more videos going up once we figure that out. But just if you wanted to, here, I'm going to share screen. If you go to the Whitestone Clinic on YouTube, some former presentations are already on there. Okay, so you can track those down, and if you feel it's useful to you, you can look those up. Okay, so today I wanted to do a topic on anger, and I will still get to that, but my sources that I was reading and that I still didn't get enough of my material put together the way I wanted it. So I'm going with something I'm much easier presenting on at this moment. So I will get to anger as a future topic. But today we're doing on something called courtship, a very old term, courtship. I'm using this from a book which we use to help the people facing sex addiction, and the book is called Facing the Shadow, Patrick Carnes, and it's a third edition. And in this book, pages 105 onward, it describes different stages, 12 stages actually, of courtship. Now, I'm going to present these ideas to you to sort of make you think, has this been an aspect of my relationship or ships in the past? What was I good at, strong at, adept at? What was I not good at in my current relationship, if I'm in one? What is that like for me? Do I have this ability to do some things but not other things? So there's about 12 stages or steps or parts of a courtship. And then there's another way that you can take this and turn it into a tool. So what I mean by turning it into a tool is you can kind of use these as points and look at your day and say, in my relationship today, how many of these things did I carry out well? How many did I carry out at all? And then maybe I can get a better idea of how to pursue my partner more. Okay, so I'll give you some tips on that as well. Now, the first thing that happens in pretty much every relationship is noticing. You notice somebody. This is a big problem for some couples because, if you catch your partner noticing another beautiful person, it can become triggering and upsetting. But noticing is a very common feature because, especially for those who are more visually oriented, and when you're noticing, it doesn't necessarily mean anything else is happening other than noticing, say, hey, that's a beautiful person. Okay. I think what most people have trouble with in their relationship is that they're imagining, and maybe rightly so, that the person who notices is also capturing that image to use it sexually. That's a whole different story. That's not what we're talking about here. In a normal relationship, you can notice things about the other person. When you first meet them, for instance, there are certain features that you're going to notice more. But even in a longer term relationship, you can start to connect with a person and notice, wow, they changed their hair, or that's something new that they're wearing, that kind of thing. So noticing is just a normal part of courtship. And what I usually say with all these things that I'm going to give you is, if you can, as a little bit of a challenge, think of these things and think of 3 actions that you could take that would exemplify these things. So if noticing might have to lead to some compliment giving, for instance. Okay. I noticed you changed your hair. It looks nice. Or something like not my hair, but you know what I mean. So that's the kind of thing, like to think of a couple of examples that you could use. Okay. So noticing is the ability to perceive attractive traits in others with an existing partner. This means you're able to stay conscious of that person's desirable traits. And the dimension requires the capacity to filter out traits that, while desirable, are not a good match for you. In other words, noticing also means discriminating, choosing. Okay? So noticing is one. I'm just going to write that down in um, in our chat. My chat is not coming up for some reason. There we go. I'm going to make it to everyone. Feature number one, noticing. Feature number two, attraction. Now, that's probably what more people get upset about if they feel their partner's attracted to somebody else. But think about this. Is this the ability to feel drawn towards others and maybe imagine acting out on those feelings? So in a partnership, in a real relationship, you are attracted to some things, many things about your partner, some things you're not, but you can still feel attraction towards the person. A couple things to consider about attraction is the key word curiosity. And what that's really what gets missing in a lot of long-term relationships is that people lose the curiosity to know more about their partner, to understand the depths of their inner world, to try to comprehend their mindset, their where they're coming from, understanding more of their background, understanding more of their passions and their interests. That's where love stands, right? That's where really you're getting to an intimacy and love is, and we'll get to that later in the 12 aspects here, but it starts with curiosity. And when a relationship loses its curiosity, it's heading in a very bad direction. So, attraction is another word you can use as curiosity, is a key feature for courtship. If you think about it, nobody would be together if they didn't have at an early stage, after noticing, some attraction towards the other person. Um, so, being able to maintain an openness to change and the unknown is a key factor in longer term relationships. In reality based relationships, partners keep discovering the other person. That's a sign of a healthy, evolving relationship. So we got noticing, we've got attraction. The next thing that we have is flirtation. Now, this is not just for when you just met the person for the first time. That happens a lot of the times. Flirtation takes place. It Flirtation has to have a role in an ongoing relationship. It Everybody needs to know how to flirt. Um, some people are good at it. Some people are terrible. Successful flirting uses playfulness. There's a little bit of a engagement, a back and forth. Okay, a bit of play. It's not so serious. It's an operation on social cues. You're reading the field. How are things going with this person? So there's a lot of purpose to flirtation, but it's fun and it's meant to be a way of just being more playful with the person. Ability extends to noticing, accurately reading the flirtation from others as well. It's not just you knowing how to flirt, but you recognizing flirting coming your way. I cannot tell you how many people I've dealt with that are completely obtuse when it comes to others having flirted with them. You could be out with somebody maybe even and see somebody flirting quite obviously, and they're just not seeing it. So it takes a certain kind of skill to notice that we're, in a terms of a flirtation with another person. The key element of flirtation is knowing when it's appropriate. So there's times to be playful and there's times to not. So you have to be very careful when you're going to be flirting. Another aspect I'm going to mention is, and this is important for long-term couples, um, flirtation shouldn't be seen as immediate jump to foreplay, immediate jump to sex. Flirtation can be flirty all day, and it doesn't mean you have to lead to coitus or genital sex or anything like that. Flirtation is just for fun. It's just to flirt, to say to the other person, "I'm interested in you, and I find you to be a sexual person," and that's good. It's good enough. Okay. Now, another aspect after flirtation is demonstration. Okay. Demonstration is showing off. Well, not really, but you wear a certain kind of clothing to be noticed. You do your hair a certain way to be noticed. You exercise to be certain kind of fit. You wear makeup, or that kind of thing. So all these things are demonstration. Okay. And if what I would say to couples who are longer term together is flirtation really requires that you sorry, demonstration requires that you would um, consider what the other person finds attractive about you and to highlight that for them. So you're not trying to objectify yourself, but rather you're trying to be to be present to them in ways that they like. And an example would be you're at home, it's all COVID shutdowns everywhere, and you could wear your underwear all day or jogging pants or something. But because you're around the house with your partner, you put on a nice pair of slacks or a nice dress, and you wear a collared shirt. You don't have to, just to kind of demonstrate, just to be more there, to be visually stimulating to the other person, and that's good as long as you're not objectifying yourself into an object to be used. It's good. And I would say a lot of couples fall out of that quite early. They get used to just being themselves out and about in the house, and they stop doing their demonstration. And that's a sad loss in the coupleship and in a courtship. So it's a good thing to keep track of. Are you demonstrating that you're interested in the other person and that you're willing to be interested in? Okay. The next one we're going to talk about here is romance. Okay. Now, romance is um, a very different topic. A lot of people have very varied views on this. I think Carnes, yeah, he describes it as the ability to experience, express, and receive passion. I like to think of it as delving into the mystery, right? So expressing creatively certain things to show your interest and curiosity and that kind of thing, that to let the other person know that they're of interest to you, like that kind of thing. So, leaving little love notes, sticky notes, randomly everywhere for them to discover. That could be an example of romance. Writing a poem, um, using your creative talents and other ways to show that you care. Um, Selecting songs that would be liked by your partner, and sort of like a listening list that they can use. All these are examples of being romantic, but they kind of touch on the creativity and passion. And a lot of romance died out of relationships over time. They've just lost it. They become living like partners, or flatmates, or whatever term you want to use, and they're no longer showing a passion for the other. And usually when passion dies in this way, it dies in the other ways too. Like sex is usually not as there as much and that kind of stuff. Another reason that romance is so important is it keeps the curiosity alive in your partner, and it shows effort. It shows that, okay, well, you can be attracted and maybe not say something. You can flirt and the person may not get it, but when you're being romantic, they know you're doing some kind of gesture. The one thing I would remind couples who've been through infidelity about is, when you're practicing romance, is that some things have been tainted. They've been tainted by the old behavior. Maybe when you got into trouble, you would do a romantic gesture. Romance is not a get out of jail free card. It shouldn't be used that way. But when it is, it taints that aspect. So if the person was in the doghouse and they brought home some flowers, now flowers might be tainted as a romantic gesture. So instead, you've got to write a poem or do something else. So just be aware of which romantic gestures can or might have been tainted through previous behavior, and try to avoid those behaviors when you're recourting each other. Okay. Um, so romance is a big one. The next one we're going to talk about, and this people are surprised when they see this one, is individuation. So, wow, what's that? Some psychological term, right? Basically, individuation is when you're being true to yourself. And I got to tell you, I hear it so often, especially from betrayed partners, how they went against their own sense of right and wrong, or their own sense of their values, and to compromise to please the other person. That's non-individuation. That's the opposite of what we're talking about, right? In a healthy relationship, a good courtship, a person can truly be themselves. And in truly being themselves, they're going to get love for who they are. So now I'll take it from the other side. I see it so often in the addicted population, that they constantly live in fear of rejection because they know that aspects of their true self are being hidden. And if they feel if they ever let that out, they would be outright rejected. So they live in constant fear: is my image being held up? Are they still attracted to my image? And they're no longer feeling like they're attracted to me, but rather I have to keep up the image for them to be attracted to. And that's so lonely and isolating and not healthy either. So individuation means being truly who you are in the relationship, and not being fearful or intimidated to be otherwise. Okay. Trusting that the other can accept you for who you are. And sometimes that's one of the hardest ones people need to develop. Okay. So after individuation, we're going to talk about intimacy. Okay. And you'd think, well, isn't the whole thing intimacy? Yes, in a way, the whole thing could be part of intimacy. But the first thing I say about intimacy, and I have to correct a lot of clients here, is don't confuse it with sex. So many times, I don't know if it's just linguistic or whatever, but people say, my partner and I haven't been intimate lately. What they mean is they're not having sex. And that's the wrong thing to use. Sexual intimacy is only one form of intimacy. And sometimes it's not even the deepest, to be honest. Like there's deeper ways to feel intimate with somebody than just being sexual with them. So a sensual intimacy with sex, that's great. That can be intimacy. But when we're talking about intimacy here, we're talking about a type of an attachment, a connection that involves your most vulnerable parts. You are exposed to the person. The person has info on you that could damage you, but they hold it in a sacred trust and they care for you instead. That vulnerability, and I would say intimacy is best defined as mutual vulnerability. Um, that intimacy is what we aim for, okay? But only really happens after a bit of a longer phase in a relationship, because you can't really be vulnerably intimate right from the get-go. There's too much projection going on. You're putting on your best face, all that kind of stuff. But that's supposed to die away in relationships early on. I think for many, it lasts too long, that phase. So intimacy is about that mutual vulnerability. And you probably been in many relationships where you didn't have that, right? Or you had a semblance of it and discovered it wasn't true intimacy because too much was still hidden. Okay. So just keep in mind, intimacy is a major purpose, and we'll get back to that one a little later. The next one is starts a different phase. We have touching, foreplay, and sex. So touching, a lot of studies are being done by Tatkin and a few other people about the importance of physical touch in a relationship. There are chemicals that go off, and the brain fires in a certain way when you have skin to skin contact with somebody. This is true for little babies, as there may be a little baby in a NICU, and you have a human hand come in and touch, that helps the baby thrive. There's stories of after the fall of communism in the Eastern Bloc about orphanages in Romania and places like that where kids were abandoned too, and there just wasn't enough staff to go around, so kids literally just lay in their cribs untouched, and many of them died, not from malnutrition or anything, just they just died. They had such a lack of interaction, humanly speaking, and touch wise. They just weren't picked up, they weren't touched, and they died. Human beings need to touch. So in a relationship where you're sitting on one end of the couch and your partner's sitting on the other end of the couch and there's enough space to park a truck, that's not intimate and it's not a good courtship. And it's definitely not going to be a good indicator for a long-term relationship. You need to have touch. Now, touch can be holding hands, can be slight caressing, hugging. It could be like lying together and embracing, but rubbing I was going to say hair, but rubbing the temples, whatever. Those kind of things, like anything touch wise, is so important to have in a relationship, and it has to be ongoing because you will lose the chemicals. And when you lose the chemicals, it starts to feel like a philosophical enterprise to stay romantically or courtship wise interested in your partner. Chemicals matter, and touch is sometimes as important or more important than sex. So keep in mind, are you being conscious of how much you're touching your partner? And by touch, by the way, I mean respectful touch, right? There are other areas that we're going to get into later, like foreplay, the next one, where touch is more purposeful for pleasure, but touch just in general to stay connected. Okay, so that is the next one is foreplay. So foreplay, that's misunderstood a lot too. A lot of this talk is misunderstood because people aren't taught how to do courtship. But foreplay is connecting with a person through um, aiming to please the other person. Now, foreplay by its name implies it's leading to play, right? It's leading to sex, but not always. In fact, a lot of times when I do couple counseling, I remind the couple foreplay can be making coffee in the morning, okay? Because you're basically signaling uh, a consideration and a care for the other person. That it could be as simple as that. But typically, what we mean by foreplay is that your touch is more around the genital or secondary gender features, that kind of thing, breasts, etc. And touch is there to excite the person and that kind of thing. So foreplay can be about that, but really, a lot of couples suffer from a lack of foreplay. Usually the male, but not always, ready to jump right into sex from a little bit of stimulation, and ignoring how important foreplay is. In heterosexual couples, um, female females need more attention prior to coitus, before sex, in order to have a fuller enjoyment of the sexual act. So you have to spend more time in foreplay. And it's an expression, verbal and physical, that you're basically looking to be more pleasing to the other person and more connected to them sexually. Most people in most surveys will say that it's the best part of sex for them. Um, and unfortunately, it's most often the one skipped over. So foreplay. Now we're going to go into the next one, which is intercourse. So this is what people usually refer to as lovemaking or just sex or whatever. But intercourse is more than just the exchange of bodily fluids. Okay, there's a people forget about the psychological part that goes on when the bodies are coming together. And in addiction, especially when we deal with that at the clinic, That's especially true because most acting out is apart from feelings, meaning unless it's a romantic affair, which I hate that term, but anyway, let's say it's a romantic affair, then that might be about feelings, but most of the time it's about using the person. So going to meet somebody at a massage parlor, seeing a prostitute, having a random pickup with an app or at a bar, these things are devoid of real surrender. They're conquering, they're taking, they're using. Okay, that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about courtship intercourse. Courtship intercourse is about the psychological part as much as the physical, and it's about surrendering the body. Now, this you can say depends on your sexual proclivities, but typically, heterosexually speaking, if a male is with a female, then the female is being receptive. And so that's a type of surrender. It's a type of openness. It's a type of allowing oneself to become part of the other, and vice versa, the male becoming part of the female. So there's a physical representation of it, right? But there's a psychological one too. So, and how do we know that? Well, let's say there's the unfortunate circumstance of a female who's been abused in the past. Their body might close up. Their body might become rigid, and coitus becomes nearly impossible or impossible. That's an example of the psychological impacting the physiological, right? So if a woman is more feeling trusting and more relaxed, they're going to enjoy the physical aspects of sex that much more, right? The other side, I'll give you the example from a lot of the male problems. We have a lot of ED, erectile dysfunction issues. Erectile dysfunction happens at least four ways. There's not being able to get erect, or getting erect but not being able to stay erect, or not being able to ejaculate or ejaculating too soon. Okay, so these are all forms of erectile dysfunction, if you want to call it that, for all four, and they often have to do with an anxiety around performance. It's a performance anxiety. So again, if you're going in anxious, you're not surrendering, you're not being open, you're not being transparent, you're being rigid, you're being controlled, you're being afraid. So that's going to impact you physiologically. And so again, intercourse becomes a problem. So when I talk about intercourse and courtship, I want you to think beyond sex to the way that the psyche is involved in lovemaking, in having sex. And that's an important part of this courtship model we're talking about. Right? After intercourse, we have two more phases. They're both related: commitment and then renewal. Commitment, obviously, is a major part of being in courtship. Okay. For some people, culturally, religiously, they would put intercourse after commitment. Okay. So they have a formal marriage ceremony or something like that, and then they would have sex. But a lot of couples today do it the other way around, right? And what happens is commitment is about having a firm bond, an attachment to the other person. And I would say it's about putting the other person first, okay? Making them your priority. That's what real commitment is. Commitment isn't contractual, like, well, we have a merger of two businesses. Your business, I'm a business. We're now one business together. We're a merger. It's not contractual. Like if you do, uh, you know, um, this for me, I'll do that for you. Okay. It's not that kind of in exchange. It's really about, I put you first, you're my priority, and I'm here to stay. So those are the things that you want to think about when it comes to commitment. And a lot of times we see it again and again. That's why our divorce rate is so high. People get married, let's say, but they don't commit. They don't have the maturity or the insight or what have you to really have a commitment. What they've done is they've committed to paying out thousands of dollars for a ceremony and a party, but they haven't committed to putting their partner first and above themselves. And that's really where true commitment comes in. It requires a form of sacrifice. Let's just put it that way. So commitment is a major one, and commitment is done once. Technically not, but it's technically like a one-time official commitment, but really it requires a commitment every day. So you get married in a marriage wedding ceremony, but you stay committed by what you do each day. Okay. Now that's going to lead into the next point, which is our last point today, and that is renewal. So renewal is when you're basically taking everything we just talked about and trying to keep doing them. Keep doing it. That's renewal. Okay. Don't give up on noticing. Don't give up on attraction. Don't give up on flirtation or demonstrating. Don't give up on touch, and don't give up on all the other forms of connection that we talked about. Renewal is really the bit difference. There's a difference, let's say, between being attached to someone out of habit and being devoted because of the meaning that has evolved in your journey together. So renewal is a testimony to an ongoing story that you're still building together. That's renewal. And even when there's been damage in the relationship, renewal can happen. And part of the story becomes how damaged you were and have healed to get around. It's like when you tie something to a tree and the tree grows around it. It's still not part of the tree, but the tree has continued to grow. So renewal is a major importance. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn everything I just said to you into a tool for you to use. If you're in a relationship or will be in a relationship in the future, you can use this tool. And I adapted it from this and designed it to be used by one person, even if the other person isn't playing along. Okay. So you can do this without the other person really doing their part. Okay. And it's better when both partners are doing it, but it can work even if one person is only working at it consciously. Right. So what you do is you take these 12 steps that are stages of courtship, and we turn it into 10. And the way we turn it into 10 is we merge commitment and renewal. Okay. So that really the idea is the same. You know, am I showing a commitment to the person today? You convert it into one thing. And you take out intercourse. And the reason I say you take out intercourse is, well, most people don't have sex every day. So that would be a point you wouldn't be getting if we're going to keep track of like points. But also it helps you focus on courtship as really connecting to people, not getting to a goal of having sex. When you make it about getting to the goal of having sex, you enter into a utilitarian contract that if I do X, Y, and Z, you're supposed to give me A, B, C. That's not what we want. It's about connecting with the other person. So this is why we're going to take intercourse out of the equation and just leave the other 9 things plus the merged commitment and renewal category. So what you do is you have these things, and at the end of the day, you ask yourself, did I have anything to do with my partner today vis-a-vis noticing him or her, showing an interest or attraction to them, flirting with them, demonstrating myself to them, being romantic towards them, being true to myself, even if it leads to some conflict, being intimate in a sense of sharing my vulnerability, touching, foreplay or playing around, showing them that they're sexual, that I believe in them as a sexual person, and then some form of showing them I'm sticking around for the long haul. So you basically take those 10 things and you mark yourself at the end of the day. And a lot of people, when they start doing this, they're surprised that they might only get 3. They might, like, well, how come I'm only getting 3 out of 10? That's good. You start to work on stuff after that point. Or they might get 7 all the time, but they just can't get a certain 3 ever out. And that's been a struggle for them. And then you learn something about themselves and say, I have to go see my therapist about that because I just have a blockage really about that particular area. So those are examples of how you can use it. Now, another homework I give to people, clients, is try to come up with 3 examples of each of those 10 categories. So what's an example of a romantic gesture? What's an example of foreplay? What is an example of touch, etc.? Touch could be holding hands, hugging, cuddling. There's 3 examples. Did I do at least one of those today? Right? You don't have to get all 3, but did I do at least one of those today? So write up your own homework and say, here are 3 ways in each category I could do that any day. And then try to do at least one of those in each of these 10 categories and watch your relationship get better. Okay. So now I'm going to open it up to questions. You guys can write your questions down you can make it to everyone, or you can make sure to direct it only to me. And the questions are first going to be about the talk I gave today. And after questions are sort of done with that, we're going to move into questions about anything else you might have. So I open the floor to you. Any questions that you may want to ask me? Good question. Someone asked about, can I give tangible examples of individuation? So this one is, I did my hobby despite my partner giving me the pity eyes, right? Partner's giving the pity eyes, please spend time with me more. And it's like, no, I have a commitment to my meditation, or I have a commitment to Bible study, or I have a commitment to woodworking, or whatever it is. So I'm sticking by my commitment. Okay. Or another example could be, I was asked to do something that I preferred not to do, and I said no. I said no. And saying no, it could be individuation as well. Okay. So those are a few examples. Um, so if your partner is triggered by some aspects, do you shelve them? Do you shelve those things temporarily? Usually, yes. If you're dealing with certain behaviors that do trigger your partner, those behaviors are similar to punching them in the face. That's not your intention, but that's what they end up being. So you do not, if you become consciously aware that when I do such and such, that sends my partner into a spin, then stop doing such and such. It might come back to you later in the relationship when healing begins, and the person might say, such and such isn't such a bad thing anymore. Would you start doing that again? Or let's experiment and see if I react this time. And you consciously, as a couple, reintroduce such and such. But for the time being, don't do it. Don't do it. Simple. If it's a trigger, they're not ready for it, then don't do it. That's not love to force it on them. Good questions so far, guys. Other questions? If you're working on a question, you could do a dot, 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 and just hit enter. Then I know you're just working on writing your question. Perfect. Yeah, if you stop doing the um, certain types of gestures for your partner, it has to come up in conversation with the couple, by the couple, later on in the relationship. It has to become sort of a discussion that you have about reintroducing old behaviors, good behaviors, hopefully. It's not like, okay, I'm done and I quit and I'm never going to do it again ever. No, I know that part of it is fear, fear that I'm going to hurt the person more, fear that the person might leave me. Things like that can make a person not try. But what happens with a couple is you sort of have to pick an artificial marker, like 3 months, and say, in 3 months, we're going to sit down and discuss the things we weren't doing, the X, Y, and Z, and see if we reintroduce them. And then after you reintroduce X or Y or Z or all three, you have a discussion after to say, how did that go? And maybe the person says, it's too soon, still not ready. Or maybe they say, you know what, X is good, but I can't do Y or Z. And maybe Z we will never do again. And that happens. Okay. There are some things that end up never happening again because of a discovered sexual behavior that was done with somebody else that can no longer be part of your relationship. That does happen. But give it time and have discussions and set markers on your calendar when you're going to revisit those discussed areas, those areas of interest. Um, so where's the difference between letting your partner individuate and feeling like they just ignore you? Well, it should never be it's me and forget about you. Like especially, in coupleships where it's good that the person has a strong hobby, but when they're gone for the whole day and they don't even text you, they don't try to stay connected to you. That's not individuation. That's being a jerk, right? So the line between individuation and and being a jerk is basically doing what you have to do for you, but still staying connected through other means, through some image, some messaging that you care about the person still. Okay. Um, so saying no to something they're interested in isn't no, leave me alone. It's I'm not interested in that today. I don't feel I can do that, or that goes against my values. But I love you and I want to do X or Y with you instead. That's fine. That's individuation. But saying, get the hell out of my face, I don't want to do that with you is just being rude. And that's how you know the difference between letting your partner individuate and feeling like they just ignore you. Another question here is, I have never been great at individuation. I go along so as not to be perceived as rejecting the other, especially sexually. I'm scared that he won't want to be sexual with me. So when people are in that situation, a couple things to consider. There might be a level of what they call codependency. And there are some great groups that help out with that, with codependency. Um, Codependency is when you basically say, my welfare, my happiness level is contingent on whether that person is happy with me. Okay. So my emotions are like a railway car and it's latched to someone else's engine. That's basically codependency. And you need to do some work on that, some individual work, some therapy probably, in that sense. But the sexual element is interesting because sexually speaking, it's a really, especially for women, well, men too, it's a big marker of acceptance, right? That the person wants to be sexual with me, but we may not feel like we want to be sexual that day. We may not want to have sex, maybe be sexual, but not have sex. Um, and saying something back like, you know what, I'd rather us not have sex, but can we cuddle? Is individuation. And it's healthy, it's good. And the other person could say, well, I'd much rather have sex, but yeah, I'll cuddle with you. And then that's a fine, that's a good thing. But being afraid that the person won't ever want to be sexual with you again can be because of their bad patterns of behavior. Maybe they've done that all or nothing type of behavior in the past, and that's why you're scared. but a lot of times it has to do with your own codependency. So yeah, I guess I would just say you got to try it. You got to take this bald, hairy guy's, bearded guy's word and just try it, and then you'll see what you can come from it. There are some good that can come from it for sure. Okay. Any other questions? There's a few people who haven't asked any, but that's okay. No one's obligated. Okay, I'm going to try to ask you guys a little question myself here as you write down maybe any remaining questions. Um, okay, I'm going to give you a very simple one and see if I can make it work. Um, Usefulness. Okay, I'm learning here, guys. I'm going to launch a poll. So, would you use the courtship index in your relationship or in a future relationship if you're not currently in one? It's anonymous, so I don't see what your answers are. Well, that's wonderful news. We have 100%. Look at that. Okay. Well, listen, you can get more information from the book Facing the Shadow, or just if you've written down those 12 categories I gave you, you don't need the book to do it, honestly. But what I would suggest to you is go and do it for a little while and then get back to me um, with an email or something to tell me how it's working, or if you had to adapt it in some way or whatever. And I can pass that kind of experience on to other clients and they can benefit from your participation. So I'm really glad that you guys found it useful. And what we're going to do now is open it up to any questions that you still might have. We have about 10 minutes left. We'll end early if there's no questions, but if you have any other question, does not have to be about the talk here today. Just pass it, type it through, and I'll try to answer it if I can. Okay, we have another question. Oh, we have a few other questions. What do you tell people when they ask about your shirt? So the shirt, yeah, the shirt says, love people, hate porn. I tell people that porn doesn't treat people as people, and that there's better sex in an intimate relationship than there is on a porn set, because it's genuine between two human beings who love and care about each other, which is so much more important than acrobatic sex. or something to that effect. Comes out different times. Um, would you say porn, erotica, like novels, are similar? Yeah, they're similar. Different parts of the brain are activated. Erotica, are novelettes and things like that are ways to let the porn set in the mind play out the video, versus having the visual images already done for you. Um, it, there there can be technically a good storyline and some good to a porn, sorry, erotica, but let's face it, most of the time it's made to be sold or to be a masturbatory material, and I'm not a fan of that per se, but I would say that it can be useful in some situations. But I think most of the time, if we're being honest, it's about exploitation. And we can go into a whole deep dive on that. So maybe I'll leave that for another topic. That might be an interesting topic. Should the betrayed spouse continue to use this tool even now? Many betrayed spouses do not use the tool at first, to be perfectly honest. It's a bit much to ask. I think there's too much recent trauma and hurt to engage in a lot of this. They might participate by being receptive in, say, holding hands, hugging back. Um, Sometimes sex is still part of the relationship, and they have to be honest about if the sex is duty sex, which I don't recommend, or if it's genuine sex. Okay. If it's duty sex, then you need to take a break from as a couple having sex. And having said that, I recognize that freaks out a lot of partners who say, if I don't give my addict husband or something sex, he's going to go somewhere else for his drug. It's like, you're not a dope pusher and you're not supposed to be providing the drug. It's not healthy for the person to be in that cycle anyway. So sometimes it's better for the relationship to just get out of sex for a while and try to work on the other things instead. Um, so that's what I would say. That use the tool in a sense of being receptive that your partner might be using the tool, but don't feel that you necessarily have to um, do all the steps yourself. Like for instance, if you're going to demonstrate, you want to dress up pretty, whatever, fine, go ahead, but do it because you want to look good that way. Don't necessarily do it to have to entice the spouse. Just do it because you want to feel good about how you're dressed. Okay, that kind of stuff. So I would say for the betrayed partner, this tool is more about how to be receptive than to worry about whether you're scoring 10 points or not. Okay. Well, that's good, guys. We're running out of time. Give me a dot, dot, dot if you still have a question. Otherwise, we'll wrap this up. Okay, so just in summary, then, this is what we call a courtship index. It's based on Dr. Patrick Carnes' 12 stages of courtship found in Facing the Shadow workbook. And you can read some other materials, I'm sure, from him on it. It's something that I think can help couples have a template to work off of in pursuit of each other. And I just really encourage you guys to try it and make it your own. And by the way, there are other variants that you can use and ways you can plant new things into this structure, but this is the one that Carnes gave us. So if you find other angles and other ways to say, hey, there's another dimension to this that Carnes doesn't have, feed it back to me, and maybe I can put it into another presentation and help other couples in my therapy. So even though I'm doing this for free, for you guys, I learn from doing the presentation sometimes. I learn from your feedback, and I look forward to communicating with you in the future. So in the meantime, take care of yourselves, please. If you don't take care of yourself, right, who will? If your partner is good partner, great. You still got to take care of yourself. And if you haven't talked to a therapist in a while and you're due, make your appointment, talk to your therapist. And if you can build support for yourself outside of your primary partner, build support for yourself. You're worth it. And if you don't show you're worth it, then you need a therapist to tell you you're worth it. Okay. So hang in there, guys. And I'll see you next time. And I look forward to your emails if you have any. Okay. All the best.